Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is February 14th, 2026. I'm your host, and I am sitting here with a stack of reports that, quite honestly, kept me up last night. We are tackling a subject today that feels like it's pulling the country in two different directions at the exact same time.
It's the tension of the decade, isn't it?
It really is. We are talking about black youth in America. And to set the stage, I want to start with something that I think everyone listening already knows, even if they haven't quite articulated it. If you look at the cultural landscape of the world right now, not just the U.S., but globally, black culture is the engine.
It is. It's the operating system.
It is the operating system of modern cool. Music, fashion, the way we speak, the memes we share, the athletes we worship.
The slang, the dances, everything.
Everything. If you look at the influence factor, black youth are statistically the most ascended demographic on the planet. They set the temperature for everyone else. But, and here's the massive, uncomfortable paradox we are unpacking today. If you put down the culture magazines and pick up the educational data, the picture inverts.
It flips completely upside down. You have a demographic that is, winning the culture war, but is statistically being left behind in the structural war. And the data we have from 2025, it is.
It's alarming.
Alarming is a polite word for it. We see these headlines about test scores slipping. We see the opportunity gap, what we used to call the achievement gap, and it feels more like a chasm.
And it's stubborn. It's not moving.
Right. And the context here really matters. We're sitting here in 2026. We are 2 years past the Supreme Court decision that effectively ended affirmative action. We are, for all intents and purposes, post-pandemic. The dust has settled.
That's the key. We can't blame the immediate chaos of the lockdown anymore. I mean, for a while, that was the explanation for everything, right?
Of course, and it was a valid one.
It was. But the fog of war has lifted, and now we have to look at the battlefield. We have the numbers. So the mission for this deep dive is to look at that battlefield with clear eyes. We aren't here to bash the kids. We aren't here to just blindly bash the schools. We want to answer a specific, hard question. Is what we are seeing a decline in actual ability? Is it a catastrophic failure of the system? Or, and this is where I think the story gets really surprising, is it a strategic redirection by the students themselves?
I think redirection is the word of the hour, because when you look at the raw test scores, it looks like a collapse. But when you look at the behavior, where these students are applying, how they are moving, it looks like a pivot, a conscious choice.
We're going to do this with honesty without cruelty. That's our rule today. So let's start with the cold water, the data. I want you to walk me through the landscape as it stands right now in early 2026. What are we looking at? No emotion, just facts.
Okay. It is sobering. If we look at the 2025 Kids Count Data book from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, we are looking at what I can only call a proficiency cliff.
Give me the numbers.
9 in 10 black 8th graders are not proficient in math.
Wait, pause there. 9 in 10.
9 in 10, that's 90%.
90%.
Yeah.
I want to clarify what not proficient means, because I think people hear that and they think illiterate or can't count. What does the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, actually mean by proficient?
That's a crucial distinction. Thank you for asking that. Proficient in this context means demonstrating a solid academic performance and competency over challenging subject matter. So if you are below proficient, it doesn't mean you can't add 2 plus 2. It means you probably cannot apply mathematical concepts to real-world problems.
The things like fate.
Things like calculating a tip at a restaurant, understanding interest rates on a loan, or analyzing a simple data set in a news article. You are, in effect, functionally shut out of the modern economic toolkit.
Okay, so 90% of black 8th graders are being shut out of that toolkit. What about reading?
For 4th graders, it's 85% not reading at grade level.
85.
And again, context is everything. These are the lowest proficiency rates of any racial group in the United States. And if we look at the trend lines, this isn't just a blip from the pandemic. This is a slide.
I remember reading that back in the 70s and 80s, we were fixing this. The gap was closing.
We were. That's the real tragedy of it. If you look at the ENA-GEP trends from the 1970s through the late 80s, the gap between black and white students was narrowing significantly. I mean, we were making real, measurable progress.
Well, what happened?
Around 2008, that progress just stalled. It flatlined. And then post-2020, it didn't just stall, it deteriorated.
So we went in reverse.
Aggressively in reverse. Between 2012 and 2023, nearly 40 years of progress in math scores for 13-year-olds essentially vanished.
40 years.
Think about that. 2 generations of gains wiped out in a single decade.
That is, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I want to pause here because when I hear numbers like that, 90% not proficient. I know what a certain segment of the population thinks.
Hmm.
There is a very dangerous, quiet assumption that pops up, the bell curve argument. The idea that maybe this is just genetic, maybe it's innate.
Or that the culture doesn't value education.
Right, that's the other one.
We need to stop right there and address that head on, because that is the lazy conclusion. And the science, actual rigorous science, completely destroys that argument. But you have to look at the right data. We have to look at nature versus nurture.
Let's unpack that,
Yeah.
because you found some incredible studies regarding twins that basically put the genetic argument to bed.
This is the Turkheimer study. It is, in my opinion, one of the most important pieces of sociological research ever done. It's brilliant in its simplicity. So they looked at twins. Identical twins share 100% of their DNA. So if IQ is purely genetic, their IQ should always be very similar, regardless of where they live or how they're raised, right?
Right. Nature should win every time.
Huh.
That's the hypothesis.
Exactly. Here's what Turkheimer found. If you look at twins in middle-class families, families where there is enough food, safety, books, stability genes do explain a lot of the variation in IQ.
Okay.
Because the environment is stable, the genetic potential can express itself. It's like planting two genetically identical seeds in perfect, nutrient-rich soil. The difference in height at the end is mostly down to the seed's DNA.
Okay, so in a good environment, genes matter.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But, and this is the clincher, this is the whole story, when they looked at twins living in poverty, the results flipped, completely inverted. Genes explained almost none of the variation in IQ.
Almost none.
The environment was so overwhelming, the stress so high, the resources so scarce, that it completely swamped any genetic influence.
So the soil is so toxic that it doesn't matter how good the seed is.
Exactly. Poverty essentially suppresses genetic potential. It puts a ceiling on what the brain can demonstrate. So when we see these massive gaps in test scores, we aren't seeing a lack of ability. We are seeing a suppression of ability.
That is such a powerful finding.
Yep.
It completely reframes the entire issue. It's not, why aren't they smart enough? It's, what in their environment is crushing them?
Precisely. And to back that up, just look at the infant data. There were researchers, Fryer and Levitt, who tested infants. We're talking babies 8 to 12 months old. At that age, before the school system and the neighborhood have really sunk their teeth in, there is no measurable cognitive difference between black and white infants. Statistically, zero. The gap does not exist at birth. It is created. It opens up after birth as the children interact with their environment.
Wow.
So when we ask what is happening to black youth, we are not asking what is wrong with them. We are asking what is happening to them.
That leads us directly into the mechanics of that suppression. Because environment is a vague word. I want to get specific. You used a term in our notes that really stuck with me. Concentrated disadvantage.
Yes. This is a sociological concept from Robert Sampson at Harvard. And it's crucial because it explains why simply being poor isn't the whole story. There's a massive difference between being a poor family in a mixed-income neighborhood and being a poor family in a neighborhood where everyone is poor.
It's the density of the struggle.
It's the density. It's when institutions have collapsed, danger is high, resources are scarce, and there are no role models of success outside of maybe sports or entertainment. And Sampson actually quantified the cognitive cost of that density. He found that growing up in a neighborhood of concentrated disadvantage has the same effect on a 5-year-old's verbal ability as missing an entire year of school.
Wait, hold on. Say that again?
The cognitive development of a 5-year-old in that environment is equivalent to that of a 4-year-old in a stable environment. They lose a year.
So before they even walk into kindergarten, before they've even met a teacher, if they live in one of these zones, they're cognitively a year behind.
Yes. Just from the environmental stress, the lack of stimulus, the constant fight or flight mode their brains are in, you can't learn your letters if your primary focus is just staying safe.
So they show up to the starting line of the race, and they're already 100 yards back. And then they walk into the school building, and this is where I get so frustrated with money doesn't matter in education crowd. Because the data shows we're systematically underfunding the very schools that need the most help.
It's simple math, really. School districts with high percentages of students of color receive about 13% less in state and local funding than predominantly white districts.
What does that look like in dollars per kid?
It comes out to roughly $733 less per student per year.
$733. Now, that might not sound like a fortune to some people listening.
Right, but you have to scale it.
Exactly. Multiply that by a classroom of 30 kids. What is that? That's over $20,000.
It's about $22,000, yeah. Missing from that one classroom every single year.
$22,000. That's a teacher's aide. That's a library of new books. That's a laptop cart. That's an after-school tutor. That's a science lab that isn't from 1985.
Exactly. And over the course of a K through 12 education, that's nearly $10,000 taken out of that specific child's backpack. It's an investment we are choosing not to make.
Speaking of backpacks and laptop carts, we need to talk about the digital divide, because I feel like in 2026, people roll their eyes at this. They say, look, everyone has a smartphone. The divide is closed.
That is a dangerous, dangerous myth. We need to distinguish between technological access and technological reality. Yes, the data shows about 90% of African Americans have internet access, that's true. But the devil is in the details. About 10% rely only on smartphones for that access.
I want to paint a picture here for everyone listening. Let's imagine a student. Let's call him Jordan. Jordan is 16. He's smart. He wants to go to college. He has an essay on The Great Gatsby due tomorrow, but he doesn't have a laptop at home, and the library is closed.
Right. So Jordan is sitting on the edge of his bed trying to write a 5-page research paper on an iPhone 14.
Have you ever tried to do that? To write something substantial on a phone?
I can barely send a long email without getting frustrated and giving up.
Imagine the friction. You're thumb typing. You can't have your source material open in one window and your document in another. Formatting is a nightmare. Every time you switch apps, you lose your place, you lose your train of thought.
It changes the entire cognitive load. Instead of thinking about his argument or his thesis statement or F. Scott Fitzgerald's use of symbolism, Jordan is thinking about the interface. He's fighting the device.
Meanwhile, his counterpart in a well-funded district is sitting at home on a MacBook Air with dual monitors, dragging and dropping citations with Zotero.
That is the capability barrier. It's not about access, it's about capability. If you only have a phone, you are a consumer of the digital economy. You watch TikToks, you read tweets, you buy things on Amazon. If you have a laptop, you can be a creator. You can code, you can design, you can write, you can build a business. That distinction determines your economic future.
So Jordan is fighting the device at home. Then he goes to school, and he's fighting the funding gap. And then we have to look at who is standing at the front of the room.
The teacher experience gap. This is a massive, often overlooked factor. Black students are significantly more likely to be taught by first-year or uncertified teachers, and the representation numbers are shocking. As of the most recent data, only roughly 6% of U.S. teachers are Black, nationwide.
6%. I want to push on this. Why does that specific number matter so much? Is it just about feeling comfortable or seeing someone who looks like you, or is there a performance metric attached to it?
Oh, it's absolutely a performance metric. The UNCF has powerful data on this. It's a phenomenon they call the belief gap.
The belief gap. Explain that.
The data shows that Black teachers, on average, hold higher expectations for Black students. It's not that they're biased, it's that they have a different frame of reference. If a white teacher who maybe grew up in the suburbs and has only seen Black youth portrayed in media looks at Jordan, she might subconsciously expect less. If he struggles, her internal narrative might be, well, that's to be expected given his circumstances.
It's almost a soft bigotry of low expectations.
It is. But a Black teacher who maybe sees herself or her brother or her cousin in Jordan is far more likely to look at him and say, no, I know you can do this. I'm not letting you slide. I've seen people from your exact situation succeed.
It's the difference between pity and high standards.
Exactly. And students rise or fall to meet the expectations set for them. It's the Pygmalion effect. It's real.
Okay, so we've established the gap is manufactured by the environment, not biology. We've established the resource desert these kids are walking through every day. Now, I want to pivot to what happens when they stumble in that desert, because this is the part of the data that makes me the most angry. Segment 3, discipline.
This is the most infuriating part of the data set for me, too, because it's not just about neglect. This is about active punishment. This is the system actively working against them.
The stat that stopped me cold, I had to read it 3 times to believe it, was about the toddlers.
Yes. In pre-K, we are talking about 3- and 4-year-olds, children who are still learning to share toys and not bite. Black children represent about 18% of enrollment in pre-K, but they represent 43% of out-of-school suspensions.
They're suspending babies.
They are suspending babies. They are labeling 4-year-olds as problems before they can even read. It sets a trajectory from day one.
And it doesn't get better as they get older, does it?
No. Overall, across all grades, Black students are suspended at 3 to 4 times the rate of white students. Now, the common rebuttal, and you'll hear this on talk radio, is, well, maybe they are misbehaving more. Maybe it's a culture of disrespect.
Right, the behavior myth.
But the data allows us to look at why they are suspended, and this is critical. White students are most often suspended for what we call objective offenses.
Like what?
Smoking in the bathroom, vandalism, cutting class, bringing a weapon. These are things you either did or you didn't do. It's binary, there's evidence.
Clear cut.
Black students, on the other hand, are disproportionately suspended for subjective offenses.
Disrespect,
excessive noise, willful defiance, attitude, loitering. These are things that depend entirely on the perception and the bias of the teacher or administrator.
So if a white kid is loud and energetic, he's spirited. If a black kid is loud and energetic, he's aggressive or disruptive.
Precisely. And if you have a teacher force that is 94% non-Black, and we know implicit bias is real for everyone, then enthusiasm can look like threat. And this hits Black girls particularly hard. There's a term for it. Adultification.
Tell me more about that. That's a powerful word.
There was a landmark study by the Georgetown Law Center on poverty and inequality. They found that adults across the board view Black girls as older, less innocent, and more aggressive than white girls of the same age. As a result, Black girls are suspended at 3 times the rate of white girls.
For doing what? Just being tweens?
For age-appropriate behavior. If a white 12-year-old rolls her eyes or sucks her teeth at a teacher, she's being a tween. It's annoying, but it's seen as developmental. If a Black 12-year-old does the exact same thing, it's perceived as being disrespectful and threatening authority. She gets written up and sent to the office.
And the cost of this isn't just a day at home playing video games. There's a cumulative effect, a spiral.
The spiral is real and it's documented. One suspension doubles a student's risk of dropping out later. Dropping out triples the risk of justice system involvement. This is the mechanism. This is the school-to-prison pipeline in action. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a funnel. Black students are 15% of the population, but 31% of school-related arrests. We are criminalizing childhood in these environments.
It's a heavy picture. It really is. Decline, disadvantage, punishment. If we stop the deep dive right here, you'd think the story of Black youth in 2026 is an absolute tragedy. You'd think they're checking out, giving up, and falling off the map.
But they aren't. And this is the most important part of this entire conversation. This is the plot twist.
Let's talk about the redirection. Because despite everything we just said, the underfunding, the bias, the suspensions, something incredible is happening right now in 2026.
Let's go back to 2023. The Supreme Court strikes down affirmative action in the SFFA decision. Do you remember the predictions from all the experts?
Oh, I remember. Every pundit on every news channel predicted a total collapse.
Yeah.
They said Black enrollment would plummet, applications would dry up.
They said students would feel so unwelcome they wouldn't even bother applying. It was called the chilling effect theory.
Right. The idea was that the door slamming shut would stop the students from even knocking.
But when we look at the Common App data for the 2025-2026 cycle, that just didn't happen.
What happened instead?
Black applications didn't drop. They increased.
By how much?
By 11%. That is a faster rate of increase than any other racial group.
11%. So the system effectively put up a no trespassing sign, and these students said, watch me.
Exactly. It's a defiant act of resilience. But, and here is the strategic redirection, they changed where they applied. They didn't just keep banging on the same doors that were now harder to open.
Wow.
We saw a decline in the enrollment of Black and Hispanic students at the Ivy Plus elite schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the big names. That enrollment dropped by about 16%.
Okay, so that's the part the headlines grab. Fewer Black students at Harvard. But where do they go? Did they just disappear from higher ed?
No. This is the crucial part. We saw a surge at public flagship universities. Enrollment of Black students surged by 8% at places like the University of Michigan, UVA, UNC Chapel Hill, UT Austin.
The big state powerhouses.
Right. And here is my analysis of that shift. I think highly talented Black students, the valedictorians, the salutatorians, the 4.0 students, who previously treated those flagships as safety schools, are now looking at the landscape and making a very calculated choice.
What's the calculation?
They are saying, okay, I can go to an Ivy League school and spend 4 years wondering if my classmates think I was a DEI hire, if I really belong. I can deal with that psychological burden and the shifting legal landscape. Or I can go to the University of Michigan or UVA, get a world-class education that's just as good for most fields, save a lot of money, and be in an environment where I can just be. where my presence isn't constantly questioned.
It's a move towards certainty and psychological safety.
It's a redistribution of talent. The talent isn't disappearing. It's taking its business elsewhere. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the HBCU renaissance.
This is massive, the rise of historically black colleges and universities.
Enrollment is up significantly, about 6% in recent cycles, and it's growing. But it's not just about nostalgia or a different world vibes. This is a ruthless value proposition. It's an economic decision.
We tend to think of the Ivies as the golden ticket for lifetime earnings. But you have data on HBCU earnings that blew my mind.
It's called the HBCU premium. An HBCU graduate can expect to earn an additional $927,000 in their lifetime compared to a non-graduate from a similar background.
Almost $1 million bump.
A life-changing amount of wealth. But here's the kicker. HBCUs make up only 3% of colleges in America. Just 3%. A tiny fraction.
Very small.
But they produce 20% of all black graduates in the country. They punch so far above their weight class, it's unbelievable. They are efficient engines of economic mobility.
And they are cheaper, right?
On average, 28% cheaper than comparable non-HBCUs. So you have lower debt on the front end and higher earnings potential on the back end.
It's a no-brainer financially.
It is. But the stat that I think explains the redirection best is about how the students feel on campus. It's not just about money.
The psychological component we talked about.
Yes. 40% of HBCU students report feeling financially and psychologically secure. That compares to only 29% of black students at other predominantly white schools.
That makes perfect sense. If you are Jordan R., student from earlier who was fighting the system, and you go to a school where you aren't constantly policing your own behavior, where you aren't subject to adultification or wondering if your teacher has a belief gap.
You have more brain power left over.
Exactly. It's cognitive bandwidth. If you aren't spending 30% of your CPU power worrying about whether you belong, you can use that power to pass calculus. You can use it to launch a startup in your dorm room.
It's an environment of affirmation instead of an environment of justification.
So the students are voting with their feet. They are finding environments that serve them. That is the redirection.
It is. It's a rational economic and social choice in a system that has become irrational.
But, and I have to play devil's advocate here, that solves the problem for the 18-year-old who is ready for college. It doesn't solve the problem for the 8-year-old who is reading 2 years behind grade level in a funding-deprived school.
You are absolutely right. The redirection is great news for higher ed, but we still have that 90% math proficiency gap in K-12. We can't just wait for the best and brightest to find a way out. We have to fix the pipeline itself.
So let's talk solutions. And I want to be clear. I don't want magic bullets. I don't want to hear just work harder or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I want to know what actually moves the needle based on data.
There is no magic bullet. Anyone who tells you there is selling something. It has to be a conveyor belt of support, to use a term from Jeffrey Canada, of the Harlem Children's Zone. It has to start at birth and go all the way to a career.
Let's start at the beginning then. Early childhood.
This is the highest ROI return on investment in all of public policy. It's not even close. We have long-term data from the Perry Preschool and Abecedarian projects. These aren't just one-year studies. They tracked these kids for decades, into their 30s and 40s.
What do they find?
They found that high-quality pre-K, and I have to stress, high quality with trained teachers and a structured curriculum leads to lower incarceration rates, higher earnings, better health outcomes, even higher rates of home ownership when those kids are 40 years old.
It literally ripples through their entire life.
It does, because you are building the foundation of the brain when it's most plastic. But are we doing it? No. Only about 4% of black children under 6 are in what we would classify as high-quality state pre-K. This is the lowest hanging fruit on the entire tree. If you fix the gap at age 4, you don't have to chase it with expensive interventions at age 14.
But for the kids who are already 14,
Okay.
is it too late?
No, it's never too late. And we have proof. You have to look at Montgomery County, Maryland. This is a fascinating case study in what works.
What did they do differently there?
They rejected the no excuses model. You know that model, the one that says, it doesn't matter if you're poor or hungry, just work harder and there are no excuses for failure.
It puts all the onus on the kid.
All of it. Instead, they used whole system reform. They acknowledged the funding gap and they inverted it.
How so?
They identified the schools in the red zone, the poorer districts with the highest needs, and they poured money into them. They didn't give them equal funding, they gave them more funding.
equitable funding, not equal funding.
Exactly. They put their best principles there. They hired reading tutors specifically for struggling students. And this is bold. They pushed AP classes for everyone. They stopped gatekeeping the advanced classes based on prior test scores.
Did it work?
It worked. Black students narrowed the math gap from 22 points down to 16 points. They tripled their AP participation rate. It proves that if you actually resource the schools and raise the expectations, the ability is there. The gap shrinks when the resource gap shrinks.
It's almost like if you water the plant, it grows.
Radical concept, I know. But there is also an internal component we need to address. We talked about the external environment. But there is also the internal environment of the student's mind, the psychological piece. We have to talk about stereotype threat.
This is the fear of confirming a negative stereotype about your group, right? The fear of acting white, or conversely, the fear of proving the racist right.
Yes. It's an incredibly heavy cognitive burden. Imagine sitting down to take the SAT and thinking, if I fail this, I'm not just failing for me, I'm letting my entire race down, I'm proving the bigots right. That anxiety eats up working memory. It literally makes you perform worse in the moment.
So how do you fix that? How do you fight that internal voice?
You can inoculate against it.
Yeah.
There are some really simple, powerful interventions that teach what's called a growth mindset.
The Carol Dweck research from Stanford.
That's the one. Teaching kids that intelligence is not fixed. It's not a number tattooed on your forehead at birth. The brain is a muscle. When you struggle with a math problem, it's not a sign that you're dumb. It's the muscle growing stronger.
It sounds so simple.
It is simple, but it's profound. Short, 45-minute sessions on brain plasticity has shown disproportionate benefits for Black males in particular. It reframes struggle from I'm not smart enough to I'm in the process of learning. It takes the racial weight off the academic task.
And finally, I want to talk about mentorship. But not the let's meet once a month for pizza and a chat kind of mentorship.
No, that's nice, but it's not structural. It's not enough to overcome concentrated disadvantage. I'm talking about programs like Friends of the Children.
How does that model work? It sounds intense.
It is. They identify high-risk kindergartners, kids in the foster system, kids experiencing extreme poverty, and they pair them with a paid professional mentor, not a volunteer who might flake out.
A pro.
For how long? A school year.
For 12 years.
Yeah.
From kindergarten through high school graduation. They stick with that one child. They navigate the school system for them. They help with home life. They buffer them from peer pressure.
That is a massive commitment. It is. But look at the results. An 82% high school graduation rate for these kids, which is higher than the national average for all students, let alone high-risk ones. 98% avoided teen parenting. It shows that one consistent, caring, professional adult presence can buffer a child against almost anything the environment throws at them.
It provides the stability that the neighborhood lacks.
Exactly. It's an artificial stabilizer.
So where does this leave us? We've covered a massive amount of ground today. This has been a lot.
It has. It's a complex picture.
We've seen the decline in the test scores, and we know now that it is driven by concentrated disadvantage, funding gaps, and environmental stress, not by genetics or ability.
Correct. It's manufactured.
We've seen the disruption of the discipline gap and the digital divide, how the system itself often pushes back against these kids.
And criminalizes them in many cases.
But then we've also seen the redirection, the incredible resilience, the students applying to college in record numbers despite the legal hurdles, the students making smart strategic pivots to flagships and HBCUs.
The narrative isn't just Black youth are in trouble. It's Black youth are navigating a minefield with remarkable agility and intelligence.
But the minefield shouldn't be there in the first place.
That's the takeaway. The question we should be asking isn't, why can't Black kids keep up? The real question is, what happens when we finally clear the minds and resource the resilience they are already showing?
You mentioned that high school graduation rates are actually rising for Black students.
They are. They're up to around 81%. The desire is there. The ambition is there. The system just needs to calibrate to the students rather than asking the students to constantly find ways to survive the system.
I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. We started by talking about cultural dominance. The music, the style, the influence. But cultural dominance without structural ownership is just rented power.
That's so right. You can be the face of the brand, but if you don't own the factory or sit on the board, you're vulnerable, you're temporary.
The data we've talked about today shows this generation is trying to make the down payment on ownership. They are applying, they are enrolling, they are pushing back. It's time the infrastructure matched their ambition.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. This is a conversation that doesn't end here. Check the show notes for links to the Turkheimer study, the Annie E. Casey data, and the info on Friends of the Children. Read them, understand them. We'll see you next time.